Hey guys, Edward here from Edward279, the mixed content creator. Now, when it comes to growing flowers or veggies, you have two main options, seeds and transplants. And while there are quite a few plants that can do perfectly fine transplanted or direct sown, there are some plants that either really don't like being transplanted or are highly susceptible to transplant shock and the stress that it causes. So in today's video, we'll be covering 10 vegetables and flowers that you should almost always direct sow for the best results. While it is in fact possible to transplant bean seedlings, you must be very careful, as bean seedlings are surprisingly fragile and their delicate roots can easily be damaged during the transplanting process, unless you have really skilled hands. For the best results, sow your beans in their permanent location, as bean plants generally don't like being transplanted. But cost is another issue, as in order to plant enough beans to last a full season, you need at least 100 plants. That'll only cost you a couple bucks when buying seeds, but not so for transplants that can empty your wallet fast in this scenario. Besides, it's so easy to start beans from seed, and since beans tend to grow fast, you're not saving very much time either by starting from transplants. As a general rule of thumb, any plant in the squash family shouldn't be transplanted, and cucumbers are no exception, being more vulnerable to transplant shock than most other vegetables. If you're wondering, transplant shock is when a plant is stressed out due to being transplanted, and cucumbers are a lot more susceptible to it than other veggies. That's because the vines grow big and need big, strong root systems that grow fast. This is a problem for transplanting cucumbers, as transplanting even cucumber seedlings disturbs the roots, and lowers your chance of success by weakening the plants and making them more vulnerable to pests and disease. There are some plants that really hate transplanting, and cucumbers would most definitely make the list. Like beans, corn does not like to be transplanted, not just because their fibrous roots can easily be damaged, but also because corn plants generally do not take well to changes in their environment. Transplanting corn can also get very, and I mean very, expensive, as in order to achieve proper pollination and get a successful corn harvest, you need 4 rows of 4 plants, which translates to 16 plants. That doesn't sound like a whole lot, but the price quickly adds up, and in the end, it'll be a whole lot cheaper and more effective if to direct sow corn instead of buying transplants from a garden center. However, just like beans, transplanting corn is still possible, but only if you have very skilled hands that won't disturb the delicate roots. This shouldn't come as a surprise, but root vegetables really don't take too well to being transplanted. Carrots, radishes, turnips, and beets are all not very fit for transplanting, as the transplanting process disturbs the roots, stresses the plant out, and prolongs the time before harvest. Carrots in particular hate transplanting, and radishes grow so fast it's not even worth starting them indoors. Beets, on the other hand, can handle transplanting, but should still be direct sown for the best results possible. Root vegetables have taproots that make them unsuitable candidates for transplanting, and as we go further down this list, you may notice that most plants that shouldn't be transplanted have delicate root systems vulnerable to transplant shock, including this next plant. Just like with beans, the delicate roots of young pea seedlings can easily be damaged in the transplanting process. Peas are also vulnerable to transplant shock, and don't take kindly to transplanting, although, just like with beans, it is possible given enough care and skill as to not damage the frail roots. However, to increase your chance of success, always direct sow your peas in their permanent growing location, because when it comes to transplanting, Peas are just like beans, in that neither takes well to transplanting and both have delicate roots that are more vulnerable to transplant shock than those of other vegetables. Overall, when it comes down to whether to buy seedlings or seeds, treat peas like you would beans and always buy seeds instead of pre-started transplants unless you don't have very good luck with direct sowing seeds. Just like any other member of the squash family, melons are not fond of transplanting, as their root systems that quickly establish themselves and grow fast can really pose a problem when you're trying to transplant them. I already mentioned this when it comes to cucumbers, but just about any member of the Cucurbitaceae family should always be direct sown in their permanent location, because just like the aforementioned cucumbers, melons are particularly vulnerable to transplant shock, which stresses out the plant and lowers your chances of a successful harvest of sweet melons. And while it is possible to transplant very young melon seedlings, you need to do it really carefully as to not disturb the growing and probably already established roots. Just like melons and cucumbers, neither summer nor winter squash takes very well to transplanting, because all members of the cucurbit family are particularly vulnerable to transplant shock. Squash, melons, cucumbers, and pumpkins all shouldn't be transplanted, as the stress induced by transplant shock frequently weakens the plants and makes them more susceptible to pests and disease. Don't get me wrong, transplanting is still possible and often required in places with shorter growing seasons, but you have to do it carefully. Also, in the case of summer squashes grow fast and produce a lot, so it's highly unlikely you'll need to transplant summer squash anyway. And in that case, just direct sow them. While it is possible to successfully transplant zinnias, these bright, beautiful blossoms still very much so grow best when direct sown, as they grow quickly and their roots are vulnerable to being disturbed. Zinnias aren't as badly affected by transplant shock as carrots or squash, but they should still be direct sown in their permanent location as to not disturb the roots and for the best results. Besides, zinnias are incredibly easy to grow from seed and often grow really fast, so there isn't even a need to buy transplants. And while you can start them indoors, one, I don't see a reason to, and two, you have to do it when you have to transplant zinnia seedlings when the plants are very young and very carefully as to not disturb the roots. Another flower not fond of being transplanted, nasturtiums are a great garden addition, with nasturtiums making excellent trap crops for many types of pests. And if you're wondering, a trap crop is a plant specifically grown to draw pests away from your more prized plants. But back to transplanting. Just like zinnias, nasturtiums don't take too well to transplanting, and most gardeners report having better luck with direct sowing these beautiful, and edible by the way, flowers. Their fragile roots don't make for very easy transplanting, and even if you wanted to, it's still best as to transplant them when they're very young. If you do want to start them indoors, use peat pots to reduce your chances of transplant shock, or just direct sow them for the best results. Just like carrots, dill has an exceptionally long taproot that makes it really difficult to transplant without disturbing the roots, or in the worst case, killing the plant. To avoid this, you must be able to transplant dill without disturbing its roots, which is most definitely a real challenge due to how long the taproot on even dill seedlings is. And just like with carrots, it's almost always best to direct sow dill, as even very young dill seedlings don't take well at all to being transplanted, and transplanting them while leaving the root entirely undisturbed and in a way that minimizes the chance of transplant shock, stressing the plants out, is a very real pain in the neck no gardener should have to deal with. And as it stands, the absolute best way to grow dill is to almost never start it indoors. Now, before I sign off, there is one more thing I should clarify. Any of these plants actually can be successfully transplanted. It's just that it's not easy and oftentimes stresses out the plants and induces transplant shock. However, some gardeners just don't have very good luck with direct sowing, and in that case, be very careful when transplanting the plants on this list to avoid causing unnecessary damage or inducing transplant shock. We hope you enjoyed this video. As always, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!